In 1968, a small island of fewer than 2 million people released a new sound onto the world. Nobody in London, New York, or Tokyo paid much attention at first. Within a decade, that sound had conquered the planet. Within 50 years, its descendants, dancehall, reggaeton, soca, afrobeats, had built the infrastructure of modern global pop music. A region smaller than the state of Florida had rewritten how the entire world sounds. This is the story of how Caribbean music took over the world. Part 1. The Foundation, Calypso and the Power of the Spoken Word. Before reggae, before dancehall, before any of it, there was Calypso. Born in Trinidad and Tobago in the early 19th century from the oral traditions of West African slaves, Calypso was the Caribbean's first global music movement. The griot tradition, a West African practice of communal storytelling through song, survived the Middle Passage and was reborn in the cane fields and streets of Trinidad as Calypso, politically sharp, rhythmically hypnotic, and socially fearless. Calypsonians used their songs to mock colonial authorities, expose government corruption, celebrate community heroes, and comment on current events in language so clever and layered that censors struggled to prove the offense. The Mighty Sparrow, Lord Kitchener, and Calypso Rose brought the genre to international recognition in the mid-20th century. Kitchener's "London is the Place for Me," recorded as he stepped off the Empire Windrush in 1948, is one of the most remarkable documents in Caribbean musical history, a man singing his optimism about arriving in a country that would not always welcome him. From Calypso's foundation, two revolutionary offshoots emerged. The first was the steel pan, invented in Trinidad in the 1930s and 1940s when colonial authorities banned traditional African drums, forcing musicians to find new instruments. They found them in the oil industry. Discarded oil drums, tuned by hammering, could produce a full chromatic range of notes. The steel pan is now the official national instrument of Trinidad and Tobago and one of the most distinctive sounds in world music. The second offshoot was soca, the soul of Calypso, invented by Lord Shorty in the 1970s by blending Calypso with Indian rhythmic influences and funk, producing a faster, more danceable sound that became the modern soundtrack of Caribbean Carnival worldwide. Part 2. Jamaica Speaks, Ska, Rocksteady, and the Birth of Reggae. While Trinidad was developing Calypso and soca, Jamaica was building its own musical revolution from the ground up. In the late 1950s, Jamaican musicians absorbed American rhythm and blues from sound system culture. Massive speaker rigs set up in yards and warehouses, competing for community loyalty and dancing feet. Out of that absorption came ska, energetic, brass-heavy, syncopated, and perfectly suited to the optimism of Jamaican independence in 1962. By the mid-1960s, the mood had darkened. Unemployment, political violence, and economic pressures slowed the music down. Ska gave way to rocksteady, which gave way to reggae, a new sound built on offbeat guitar, bass-forward rhythms, and lyrics that addressed social inequality, Rastafarian spirituality, and the lived experience of Jamaica's poor. The first bona fide reggae records appeared in 1968. The Maytals, Do the Reggae, named the genre, and a young man from 9 Mile, St. and Parish, was about to take it to the world. Bob Marley and the Wailers signed with Island Records in 1972. Their 1973 album Catch a Fire was the first reggae record packaged and promoted like a rock album, and it reached audiences that had never heard anything like it. When Eric Clapton covered Marley's I Shot the Sheriff in 1974 and it hit mainstream rock radio globally, the door blew completely open. Exodus, 1977, was later named Album of the Century by Time magazine. By the time Marley died in 1981, reggae had become a globally recognized genre with devoted audiences on every continent. UNESCO formally recognized it as an intangible cultural heritage of humanity in 2018. Part 3. Dancehall Erupts, a new voice from Kingston streets. In the 1980s, reggae producers in Jamaica began replacing live bands with electronic rhythms, digital beats created on synthesizers and drum machines. It was partly an economic decision, but what they accidentally created was dancehall, faster, harder, more confrontational, and built for the urgency of Jamaica's inner-city youth, who had grown up poor while the promises of independence remained unfulfilled. Dancehall DJs, toasters who spoke, chanted, and rapped over instrumental tracks, became the stars. Yellow Man, Shabba Ranks, Beanie Man, and Bounty Killer established the tradition. The genre was raw, politically charged, and lyrically uncompromising. It was also increasingly controversial. Dancehall's most explicit tracks generated bans, protests, and moral panic across the Caribbean and in diaspora communities worldwide. But those controversies only amplified its cultural power. By the 1990s, dancehall had become genuinely global. Shabba Ranks won back-to-back Grammy Awards. Shaggy's It Wasn't Me reached #1 in over 20 countries. Sean Paul, combining dancehall with pop production, had some of the biggest singles of the 2000s, Temperature, Get Busy, and collaborations with Beyoncé that brought dancehall to the absolute mainstream of American pop. And in the 21st century, Vybz Kartel became the most consequential dancehall artist of his generation, releasing chart-topping music even from prison. His influence on Jamaican culture so profound that analysts described him as the most important local pop culture figure Jamaica had produced. Part 4. Reggaeton. The Caribbean takes over Latin music. One of the most remarkable demonstrations of Caribbean music's global power is the story of reggaeton. In the late 1990s, musicians in Puerto Rico and Panama began fusing Jamaican dancehall rhythms, particularly the dembow beat, with Spanish-language hip-hop and Latin American urban music. The result was reggaeton, a genre that initially faced bans from Puerto Rican radio stations for its explicit content and cultural associations, only to become one of the most commercially dominant music genres in the world within a decade. Daddy Yankee's 2004 track, Gasolina, is widely credited as the song that introduced reggaeton to the global mainstream. It built on a foundation laid by artists like Tego Calderon and Don Omar, and paved the way for the complete mainstream takeover that followed. J Balvin, Ozuna, Maluma, and above all Bad Bunny, a Puerto Rican artist who became the most streamed musician on Spotify globally in 2020, 2021, and 2022, carried reggaeton from underground club music to global cultural phenomenon. Bad Bunny's Latin trap and reggaeton albums have broken streaming records that artists from every other genre had spent decades building. What makes this story particularly remarkable is the lineage. Bad Bunny's music traces directly to Jamaican dancehall. Jamaican dancehall traces to reggae. Reggae traces to rocksteady and ska. And all of it traces back to the sound system yards of 1950s Kingston, where selectors played imported American records and Jamaican musicians began to reimagine them. One island, one unbroken chain of musical innovation. A globalization story unlike any other. Part 5. Soca, Afrobeats, and the Caribbean sound in 2026. While reggae and dancehall conquered the English-speaking world and reggaeton took the Spanish-speaking world, soca has built its own global community through the festival circuit. Machel Montano, the king of soca, has been the genre's standard-bearer for 3 decades, pushing soca into fusion with electronic music, Afrobeats, and pop, keeping it contemporary without losing its carnival soul. Songs like Family, a collaboration between Trinidadian and Vincentian artists, became anthems heard at carnivals from Trinidad to Toronto to New York to London. The connection between Caribbean music and African music has deepened dramatically in the streaming era. Nigerian Afrobeats artists like Wizkid, Burna Boy, and Davido have explicitly cited Caribbean music, particularly dancehall and reggae, as foundational influences. Wizkid's 2020 album Made in Lagos, one of the most acclaimed African albums of the decade, was soaked in Caribbean sonic DNA. Burna Boy's Pan-African, Pan-Caribbean sound has sold out arenas on every continent. The musical conversation between West Africa and the Caribbean, which began with the slave ships and continued through decades of diaspora migration, is now conducted openly and joyfully on streaming platforms accessible to anyone. And in mainstream pop, Caribbean influence has never been more pervasive. Drake has built much of his career on Caribbean-inflected production, sampling and interpolating dancehall, soca, and reggae. Rihanna, from Barbados, built an early career on Caribbean-influenced R&B that helped reshape American pop in the 2000s. Ed Sheeran's biggest hits have leaned on Caribbean rhythm. The weekend Beyoncé released her Renaissance album, Dancehall and Afro-Caribbean sounds were central to its construction. Caribbean music is not world music, it is the world's music. From Calypso's political verse in 19th century Trinidad to the streaming platforms of 2026, Caribbean music has done something that no empire, no military force, and no political movement has ever fully achieved. It conquered the world peacefully, one melody at a time. It took the experiences of enslaved people and their descendants and transformed them into rhythms so irresistible that the entire world dances to them, whether or not they know where the music came from. Now you know. From reggae to dancehall, from soca to reggaeton, from steel pan to streaming, this is how the Caribbean took over the world. And it is still going.